Hello, and welcome to this small presentation on bringing CI to your laptops with Drone Desktop, a Docker extension. The slides of this presentation are available as part of the bit.ly link that you see on my screen, or you can scan the QR code to get a copy for yourself. Myself, Kamesh, I am a Director for Developer Advocacy at Harness, a long-term open source contributor and Google Developer Expert for Cloud. If you have any questions on this particular session, please do reach out to me on my social handles as you see the QR codes down below on the slides. Let's get started. Before we go into the core concept of today's talk, the Drone Desktop Docker extension, I want to just do a little bit of rewind, taking us back in our memories. So I'm a Java developer. Let me start with a Java example. When I kind of started to do Java development and I want to move an application into production, I basically write the application, build the application, technically a web archive or EAR, enterprise archive, and kind of write an email down to my operations guy or a document saying how to deploy the application into production. And most of the times, there are a lot of back and forth between my ops guy and myself to kind of do this deployment for the simple reason as you see on my screen, right? I started to build the application on Windows 7 and then JDK 8 and Wildfly Line with MySQL database, but the actual production environment is Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7, JDK 8, WebSphere 9 and Oracle 12 database. And this kind of caused a lot of issues when you actually moved into production because there needs to be a lot of things needs to be fixed before it actually lands in production. And this drastically improved when Docker introduced containers. And this process improved as a button via Docker file where I can basically write all my build instructions, including the OS, the Java app server, custom configuration, dependencies and board, and then do a Docker build and Docker push and into the registry, right? And that's all is going to be my set of commands that I do every day. And my operations guy is basically going to pull this image from the container registry and do a Docker run. So now this process has become much simplified and much easier, so we're able to move applications faster into production. And as the applications started to evolve with containers, they slowly became to be known as container native. So what does container native means is that a software that treats the container as a first class unit of infrastructure. The day one I start to build my application, I'm going to build my application thinking that that's going to be a container. And software that does not happen to work in and around containers, but rather purposefully designed for containers, which means that, as I said earlier, I'm going to start my application, Docker build and Docker push is going to be my two commands that I'm going to run every day on my machine to build and deploy my application, right? Soon, lots of cloud providers started to support these containers because that's becoming very hot and saucy at that time. And then people started to write every application that they already have, let it be a monolithic application and made them into containers and push them into the cloud. And this was helping them a lot, kind of moving the application into the cloud and kind of improving their deployment velocity as well. But unfortunately, this has also started to cause a lot of constraint because monolithic applications are huge. They have a lot of tight coupling and dependencies. And in fact, the application could consume a lot of resources in via RAM or CPU. And they're kind of causing a lot of issues when people start to move to cloud. Then came what we call as a microservices era, right? Where we started to break down all our monolithic applications into microservices and distribute them across multiple geographies that the cloud providers give us and make them talk through various different protocols. And this kind of greatly helped because we already have Docker in place and Docker was able to quickly containerize our microservices and deploy them. Though this gave a lot of benefits, we are able to move faster, loose coupling of services, application, etc., but they started to give a little bit more operational complexity. In a way, for example, when the number of microservices start to grow, right? Running Docker build and Docker push for each and every application is going to be cumbersome, right? And also, when you want to orchestrate these many number of services across different geographies, we need some kind of a tool which can do the act as an operation orchestrator. Otherwise, it's going to be a nightmare on your operations guys here, like when I have to do Docker run 100 times or 1,000 times, right? And in fact, this also made it complex for us to do a rollback of the version that we deployed into production in case there are some issues with that. In a short, if I have to put this made the release lifecycle become more complex and hard to manage. Okay. And there came Kubernetes. Kubernetes was able to solve partially this operational complexity. I mean to say like it was able to kind of take these containers, orchestrate them, put them in their respective nodes or computes where it needs to be there, make them talk with each other and all these things, right? My operational complexity issues were solved, but still the core, the everyday thing of build, test, and push the containers to the container registry is still not solved. And we were searching for a solution or searching for a pattern that could help us to achieve this particular or solve this particular problem. Okay. And as you all guessed, this is what continuous integration does for us, right? Continuous integration basically takes all the files from your version control, does a Docker build, Docker push kind of thing, and then push the application into the registry. And once that is done, basically Kubernetes can then take out and start to roll out the new updates, right? And this process is usually called as pipeline, right? Pipeline is nothing but a series of steps that the CI tools run to kind of build a source code and make them as containers and deploy them into or push them into the registry. But wait, as you start to leverage containers as first-class citizens as on our development stack, right? Is these CI tools are container native? There were CI tools, oh yeah, but they were not all are made for containers, right? All were not made for container native, right? And one such tool that was actually built with container nativity in mind is called as Drone. Drone is a container native pipeline that can help to orchestrate a series of containers in what is called as steps, and then build your application and deploys your application. Right? A little history about Drone. I'll leave this slide for you to read offline. But one important thing about that is that Harness acquired Drone in August 2020, and that's now becoming a part of Harness platform. Let's take a deeper look at how Drone does these orchestration or pipelines or execution of sequence of containers, right? And that's done using what we call as a Drone YAML file. A Drone YAML file typically looks like what you see on my screen. A few metadata to start with. What's the kind of this particular YAML? It's a pipeline, and what type of thing it's going to run Docker containers, a name, obviously. And as I said earlier, there's going to be series of steps. In this one, you just see only one step, but we see some more examples where we have multiple steps as well. So this particular example is going to run a container called Golang 1.18, and then it's going to run commands like go build and go test. All right, this is as simple as that. If you break this a little bit further and what is being done behind the scenes, if you look at that, if you see that the very first type Docker and name default is basically going to create a Docker volume called as a workspace where it's going to mount your sources. And then there's going to be a series of Docker run commands that's going to run these images or containers. And then the commands that you list on then is going to get executed on those containers. So this is as simple as that, right? We have been doing that manually every time. As I said earlier, if you have to run for 100 microservices, this kind of command, that's going to be super tireful, right? And this in a way also helped when you want to have a team, kind of a heterogeneous team, right? Put that way, right? Which has different set of requirements, different set of softwares, different set of settings and all these things. So with them having containers, it's made easy for us to kind of make these things put together and run as a pipeline. For example, let's imagine this team which has a Go developer, and somebody does a Selenium browser testing, and somebody does a PostgreSQL database maintenance, and finally there's a guy who's going to take something from S3 or somewhere and copy these things, right? For such a team, your build pipeline will look like this, okay? So for example, you will have a pipeline like Docker, and then there's going to be services like Postgres which is going to use for database testing, and there's going to be first step is going to be S3 copy, build, and Selenium testing, right? And this is what it's going to be used, and this is going to be repeatable, right? It's not going to change. So the developers or an operation of whoever is going to deploy the application, a DevOps guy, he doesn't no longer needs to kind of run hundreds of Docker run commands. And in fact, this goes to the next level of kind of combining multiple steps together and build what is called as plugins. We'll talk about plugins in a second. And it's kind of a reusable image that can be distributed across your organization so people can run similar steps in their pipelines as well. So this kind of packaging a reusable logic together is what is called as drone pipelines. A drone CI plugin are Docker containers that perform predefined tasks and are configured as steps in your pipeline, which means that you have parameters for that so that each different team which want to reuse that can pass different set of parameters to run the build. Plugins can also use to deploy code, publish artifacts, send notifications, and more. You can do whatever you want as part of your pipeline. This is an example of a couple of pipelines that we use. There's no difference between steps and pipelines. If you imagine, the steps basically takes commands. Here settings where we pass the configuration to the predefined task that is run by this particular plugin container, right? For example, in this case, I'm doing a Docker build and kind of having some parameters tagging this image and then sending a notification to Slack once the build is done. Okay. If you want, you can go explore a lot of plugins at plugins.drone.io. That's what you see on my screen right now. You can search by name like Java or AWS or Google or whatever it is. And you kind of see a lot of pipelines that is available there, which you can use. You don't need to write this entire logic again and again. And this is again a powerful feature of drone, again built around containers. As you saw right now, everything is built around containers. It's built to be container native. It's built around Docker containers. When all you need on your machine or in your data center is just to run Docker, right? Then the rest of the pipelines is taken care by drone pipelines, all right? So far what we just do a small recap before we go further. So what we saw is like how we started developing applications, how Docker completely revolutionized how we package the application. And we are starting to adopt the DevOps procedures. And then we started to see, okay, there's a CI tool that's a need for me because I'm starting to distribute my applications. And then drone came into picture, kind of helping you to write your pipelines in a more container native way, right? And drone plugins kind of help you to kind of do reusable plugins, which is reusable logic that can be used across your organization, or you can contribute to the community as well. All right. So far, so good. We are good. Everything is done. But now we are going to go into super crucial part of this particular stuff, right? That's where the core topic of this particular session has been. So we understood like CI is needed. So we started to do developer onboarding, right? I'm a developer now. A very, very basic requirement for any developer we do is that we ask him, okay, do you know to build containers? Do you know how to write a Docker file? Do you know how to use a Docker desktop? So these were the common questions that is being asked to the developers, right? And most of them say, yes, we do know them. So which means that they are pretty much comfortable running Docker containers, Docker build, Docker push, right? But when you start to introduce tools like drone, again, which is based on Docker anyways, people will start to say, okay, how do I run drone? Is that another CLI for me to run? Or how do I run? How do I write all these things, right? So as a developer, I always felt that for a developer, it's always a boon to have integrations to platforms, tools, etc. via plugins, right? It makes my life much easier because I'm very familiar with an environment. I start to use that environment, and tools within that environment makes me easy for it. One place where I can see everything. And that's exactly what Docker Extensions does for it, right? A way to add a new functionality to Docker Desktop, which means that I can plug in drone, I can plug in my custom tool within my organization, I can do anything I want. A way to integrate your workflows and create automation. Obviously, that's what we're going to see, how drone desktop is going to create the automation in here. And way to discover new tools to solve existing problems. And way for community and partners to contribute to Docker Desktop. These are some features that Docker Extensions provide you. And what we have done at Harness, like it's kind of taken the drone desktop, what we call as drone desktop, like taken this particular drone CI and kind of plugged it into Docker, which means that from Docker desktop, I can run drone pipeline. So which means that the developer whomsoever is coming down, he'll be very familiarized with Docker for desktop. So it's easy for him to kind of run drone pipelines as well. I'm not going to talk further. Let's jump straight into demo. Finally, we have come to the last part of the session of installing this extension and seeing how it works. The usual way to install the extension is using the Docker Marketplace, Extensions Marketplace, So you can just go there, and then once you click on the extensions, you'll get that to the Extensions Marketplace. You have all the extensions get installed. What all is available for use is listed there. Click on them to install it, right? The drone desktop extension will be there in the marketplace pretty soon, but until then, we can follow the instructions on the repository, the GitHub repository here, github.com/harness drone desktop Docker extension. All right, I have the link on the resources, so don't worry about that. And then the particular repository has the extension installation commands, which you're going to run in a second. But before that, this is completely open source, and I strongly encourage the community to contribute. If you have any features, issues, bugs, documentation updates, please feel to send me a PR. I'm super happy to merge them in, right? Thank you so much in advance for that. But let's get started installing the extension. The very first command I need to do is create a volume. So just go there, create a volume. The volume got created. And then I'm just going to do drone desktop extension. I'm going to use a different version. So I'm not going to use the version that's there. So I use the latest version, which is technically the 1.1.2 as well. So it's going to install the extension for you. So it's going to be available for you right now. I'm just going to do the installation. So it's going to pull the image from there. The image is available on the drone desktop extension on the Docker Hub, so where we have the extension images available, right? So that's pretty much the thing to install it. It's pretty easy, straightforward, couple of commands to have the extensions installed onto your Docker for desktop. All right, let's wait for the extension to be installed there, and let me go make this bigger. And so you see the extension available soon. There we go. So we have the drone desktop available for you right here. So I can go click on import to import the existing pipelines into this so that I can start running them. So I'm just going to go to the examples, and I have a bunch of things. We're going to run most of them in case. So I just imported all the thing. The very first thing is Hello World Java applications having 4 steps. The long run demo, which is a very simple sleep and error thing, just to demonstrate how this thing runs. So click on that, and then I'm just going to run everything to default and do a run. And this is going to kind of run this particular stuff for you. And then one step is going to success. You see the running command here, and the next step is going to be failed because it's not able to find the YQ command inside. All right. So now also, like, I can also use environment variables with drone. So that's what the other example shows you. When I click on this VS Code thing here, this is basically a simple drone pipeline which displays environment variables, and they have few environment variables here which I'm going to display it now. I'm just going to run this, going to choose which environment file I need to use, just go pick it up and then say yes and then run. That's it. So this is also run. So we are also able to run the load the environment variables of a particular pipeline as well. And the other one, I can also do the similar one with the secrets. I have the same one with the secret as well. So if you see here, the secrets is there, the same 4-bar secret here. Only thing is that I'm verifying if my secrets are loaded, right? I'm just injecting my secrets here. It's going to load that one. That's another simple one for us to take, right? Just go here, pick up the secret file that you want to use. That's one here, and run. Finish, right? It's successfully run. Just have 1 step, right? And last but not the least, I also wanted to show this integration, how this VS Code integration as will work, right? Let's open the bigger pipeline, so which is the Java pipeline here. So, and then let me put this one here. So it's a big pipeline which says, okay, I'm going to do a unit test for this. If you see this, I'm also using a plugin here, a Java plugin, a Maven plugin, where I'm going to build the application from, and then package application as jar, and then push the image into registry, and finally deploy the application into K8 cluster. I have a small K3s cluster running using K3D that's running on my machine on my Docker for desktop. So I'm just going to deploy that. In fact, you can deploy to any Kubernetes cluster you want, but this needs to be run in a privileged mode. The simple reason being I'm mounting a Docker socket here, which means that I have to run in a privileged mode. So the other feature of this drone desktop is that it's not only that you can run a drone pipeline from here, you can run a drone pipeline from anywhere you want. In this case, you can also run from a particular stuff on run pipeline on this thing and then run specific steps. I'm just going to use a CLI here for an example. Let's go here and then clear. I just say drone exec, and then I say network thing which I need to use. So because I'm using an Nexus repository to kind of make my Java builds faster, it's running on a different network. So I'm just pointing the network and trusted because I'm using this Docker socket. Okay, I'm just going to do there and then run this thing. And as you see on my screen, so the running has started here to update the status. Though I'm running on my CLI, my status on the this thing gets updated. The only thing is that you cannot get the logs here because the logs get streamed onto your CLI, so you will not see the logs. So obviously you can see the steps coming up. So we just have the unit test step currently running. So, and then once the unit step is done, we are going to do a packaging of jar, so which is running the next step, which is there. The second step, if you see on the pipeline thing, you have the package as jar that's getting run there. So that's what you see here. And once the packaging of jar is done, we're just going to push the image into the container registry, right? That's the third step that gets run here, right? So that's the third step where you're pushing the image into the container registry right now, the local container registry, but technically you can push to anything you want. Yeah, I'm using an official plugin here, plugins/Docker. Since it's a local registry and it's insecure, and just pushing it back to my K3D registry here, right? And tagging a few things, right? And finally, I've also applied this thing into local configuration as well, which means that I have got this thing applied. So let's go check that, right? So let's go to my command line here. Sweet. So all the steps are successful, all the greens here. Let's go kgsvc kubectl get service. I have hello world service here. Okay, I'm just going to curl localhost. So I have a node port forward here. So I'm just going to use a node port here. There we go. Welcome to drone desktop Docker extension. That's it. So we are able to run anything. Now we'll be able to run all your pipelines from within drone desktop within Docker desktop extension. That's a big name, right? That's how we do this. So we have some more resources to share. Probably that's something which I'll share in a second. Let me go to my presentation and share the resources what we have right now for you to share. There are a bunch of resources which I want to share. We saw the demo. So these are the resources, docs.drone.io, where we can find information about the drone documentation. We have the GitHub that harness drone desktop Docker extensions a place where you can find the sources as I showed right now here for this extension. And then there's a bunch of community thing, a Slack, a community forum, a meetup that's happening, everything. And also you can sign up for a free harness account, right? For doing, if you want an online account, if you try something, right? Those are the resources that's for there. And not the least, you can also scan this QR code to get to the resources, the GitHub link of the repository of the extension, or you can type it, whichever is convenient to you. If you liked my session, I love you to give me a tweet. Please to give me a tweet with my handle, harness and drone.io with the hashtag CI. It is great presenting at Docker Highlands, and thank you Docker for having me in, and hope this extension will help you to move faster into production. Thank you so much.